Jesus's enemies treated him more like a human being than his own disciples because his enemies didn't believe in him. They thought he's just an ordinary guy who was scamming people. On the other hand, Jesus's disciples treated him like he was this otherworldly being, like an extraterrestrial from the heavens visiting our planet, a god with special powers. His enemies understood his human side more than his disciples did. His enemies were genuinely fascinated. Hey, you're ordinary, so how did you do that magic trick, the miracles? And they analyzed and they deconstructed how he did it. And then they tried to experiment to see if they too could do the same tricks and con people, like how he thought he was conning others. His enemies sought to understand him in order to imitate him, so they watched him closely. His disciples didn't even bother to figure out how he was performing the miracles. They're like, he's God, he does this all the time. You see, look, always draws a crowd. They were more concerned about managing and taking care of the crowds. They need to imitate him. Why bother shining your own light? This guy here, Jesus, he's the sun. So they didn't have to better themselves like Jesus's enemies did because, they weren't competing with him. Jesus' enemies bettered themselves. They tried to be like him so they could figure out how he was doing the miracles. And his enemies could not figure out. I mean, if you're a regular guy, you're doing all these miracles, why don't you act like a god and live in riches, fame, and power? And the disciples couldn't figure out, you're God doing all these miracles. Why do you act so human? You live with the crowds of homeless and lepers and criminals and prostitutes. And there was a fault in both sides' thinking. There was a fault in the disciples to think that their ministry was a social movement, a political party, and that growth was a tactic or strategy to become the new world ruler. And then there was a fault in the enemies thinking that this guy's a scam. He's going to get caught soon. He's going to bring all these people down with him. And both sides thought that Jesus's mission was tangibly a power grab to dismantle the empire, replace Jesus as the emperor with a cabinet of governors who would be the disciples. And while Jesus did come to destroy the empire, he did not want to replace it with himself, but with everyone. Everyone as their own savior, their own healer, their own ruler and governor of themselves, self-sustaining communities of personal happiness. He was making everyone an enlightened being. He was distributing power, not gathering it for a particular side, even if that side is good. He was enacting trust, taking power from the few and freely distributing it directly to all people, allowing them to use their own power in any way that they saw fit. He was democratizing our concept of heaven. Jesus said, on earth as it is in heaven. If heaven is not a hierarchy, there is no king and no subject, there's no power inequality, then neither here on earth as well. Jesus came here for all of us to be equal, including God. God is your equal as a human being. God is your equal as a divine being. And no one understood this, except for his female disciples, his mother and Mary Magdalene. The privileged have a hard time imagining that there is anything but power. And the less privileged know that the only solution is a solution for everyone, not just for some. And even though Jesus had chosen disciples who were uneducated fishermen and farmers, very quickly they came to understand the media, fame, and the power of a large following. And within a couple years, they went from being an outcast of society to being one of its idols, from being underprivileged to extra privileged, with the status that the Messiah afforded them. And with that privilege, they began to vie and compete with one another for a right-hand seat next to God. And they very soon forgot that Jesus had come to bring equality, not perpetuate a new form of inequality. Being near God's power actually clouded their vision with its perks, instead of give them more clarity about his ultimate mission. Over and over again, Jesus said that the power does not reside in him or in any one person. It resides in all people. It resides in you. You must believe you are powerful as God, or we do not stand a chance against the inequity of this world. We will fall into the same trap that the disciples did, relying on God or a savior to save us, instead of finding the power within and allowing God's miracles to come through you so that it can come through everyone.